welcome to the live stream. Let me know if you can see and hear me because we had to do a lot of reconfiguration of this room. I have an absolutely, if we can switch to the top-down view for a second. You can see my desk is looking like a lot right now. Anyway, so things are okay. Everybody says they can see and hear me. Great. So welcome. Geograph Concept says currently doing marketing homework and calculating the cost of living in Portland, Oregon. I am sorry to hear that because the cost of living in Portland, Oregon isn't great these days. Gotta say, for years, what I actually used for my cost of living for my to get a realistic view of the cost of living versus census data, American Community Survey, I feel like it just doesn't work as well. All sorts of various government data. It doesn't accurately reflect my cheap cost of living. For years, I used the Bike Messenger Index, which was just a page where for various cities, it would tell you how many bike messengers were employed there. And then it would have all sorts of stats what a pint of beer costs at a pub, what average rent on a studio or a room share was, how much a tube costs, a bike tube. Anyway, I always found it very helpful. I used it before I moved to Oregon, actually, to try to figure out if I could afford to live here. I don't know if it's still around, but anyway, I always felt like the data didn't accurately reflect my lifestyle. Now that I live a more bougie lifestyle, I think the data is a little bit more realistic for me, but I'm still, grocery wise, people for so many years were like, how do you spend so little on groceries? And I didn't feel like I was particularly frugal shopper. I just bought what I wanted. I would try to buy dry beans. Anyway, all of this to say, my grocery expenses are quickly becoming very normal because I think about 4 months now, I've not been able to get my monthly grocery shop below $200, which is very frustrating to me. And that's it. That's all I want to say about that. Yes, bougie, it does happen. It does happen. I spend on what I value and I don't overspend on other things. I think generally probably my expenses this year are still going to be below about 20,000 US, which is, I think, not unreasonable. So, but the groceries, man, groceries. Ugh. Alana says, I hate grocery shopping. I'm feeding 6 people. Ugh. Well, what a transition in to talking about the coming recession and buy now, pay later programs. I think this is a really important topic to talk about because, as we've done on many live streams, we've talked about the coming recession. And one of the important parts, which depending on your country and your own experience, you may think we are already in the recession. You may think it's coming. So it's, hard to give universal experiences around recessions because while recessions are technically derived from data, all economics in the end is your experience of the economy is personal. And these buy now, pay later programs that really got very popular during COVID and, really started to be a thing in the mid 2010s. They have proliferated all over high income countries. So we see them heavily used in the United Kingdom, Australia, the United States, which has never met a consumer borrowing option that it didn't like. The United States of America was founded on borrowing money to fund a voyage across the ocean for the Pilgrims. So, we love to borrow money. So United Kingdom, Australia, United States, Canada, to a lesser extent than the United States. We're also seeing them in a lot of the high income countries in Asia. And I think it's an important conversation to have with regard to the coming recession, because there are a lot of worrying signs within this sector of financial services. And it's important to look at it from what it both means on an individual consumer scale around these programs, but also to talk about it from a macroeconomic perspective, because there are some concerns. I am not patently against these programs. I think that they are an interesting method of lending. And we can get into some of the stats, but what's very fascinating is they are fulfilling a niche in the world of borrowing options that is underserved. So, a lot of what people have talked about for a long time is, in rich countries, people that are underbanked. And underbanked or unbanked people means they don't have access to a bank account. Like they're operating essentially solely in a cash economy. And underbanked and unbanked people are becoming fewer and fewer with the younger generations because they prefer e-commerce. Gen Z, younger millennials prefer to buy things online. And because we like e-commerce, most people do have bank accounts. So I'm seeing far less of that. And I work with very poor young adults. I work with youth that are getting out of the foster system, youth that are experiencing homelessness. So I work with very poor not on a global scale, but on an American scale, young adults. And very few of them are unbanked. But what most of them do not have access to credit cards. So they might not have a credit score at all. They do not have access of any way of getting essentially short-term finance. They might not have a credit score. And this is very common in Gen Z, Zillennials, kind of the younger adult generations. And this is important because this is where the focus from a consumer side is for these buy now, pay later programs. I realized I haven't introduced the donut, and we are technically a donut stream. So today's donut, I can't do the overhead cam because, as you saw, my desk is just an absolute mess. So, but I mean, I could try. Where'd it go? There we go. There we go. Ignore the rest of my desk, but this is the donut. It is an old-fashioned donut, but then it's vegan maple bacon. I think it's going to be good. We're on to the new flavors at the donut shop for the new month. So that's the donut. It's coming up. But first, we got to talk about the economy, you all. Okay. Low Waist High Melanin says, love the notifications fail again, and I failed to sign up for text alerts. Hey, y'all. Thank you for the beautiful transition here to remind people that you can sign up for the text crew at textcrew.ohmydollar.com. It's totally free. I will shoot out some texts. I think there's like 20 people on it. I'm not going to spam you. All I do it is because I don't really trust these YouTube notifications. That doesn't mean you shouldn't turn them on, because I think it helps the algorithm. But thank you for the reason. I'm glad you're here. You didn't miss much. Donut now, dough later. Correct. That's what we have going on. Okay, so let's go. Okay, let's talk about this. So what are buy now, pay later? Well, if you are in any way familiar with these, like if you buy things online, you've probably seen it, where it'll be like, you can purchase a payment for $200. Like you could buy this, let's say you want to buy a printer, and it's like, you could buy this printer for $500, or you could buy it in 4 payments of $125. And did I do that math right? Yes, I did. I know how to math. And they're essentially short-term, zero interest loans to consumers. And they have been integrated by all sorts of e-commerce, including the fact that you can often use them to buy household essential items. So, they were originally kind of perceived as this idea of a way for merchants to increase the amount of likelihood that someone would say yes to an expensive purchase. So, in 2020, what percentage of it was? Hold on. So Peloton bikes, you remember how everybody got Peloton bikes in 2020? Well, in Affirm, which is one of the buy now pay later firms, because Peloton bikes were really expensive, 30% of Affirm's total revenue as a buy now pay later organization came from Peloton alone. And this is really important when it comes to like understanding why these are attractive to companies to like integrate another payment system, right? So generally when you're checking out on a website or you're buying something in a store, the merchant is paying, if you pay with a credit card or a debit card, they are paying an exchange fee, which is a transaction fee they pay to the credit card company and the processor for the credit card. So it's usually 2 to 3%, kind of depends on the card and all sorts of various different things. If you integrate with one of these buy now, pay later programs, which could be Afterpay, Klarna, Affirm, Sezzle, PayPal has their own one now, Visa has their own one now, any of these buy now, pay laters, if you are a business that decides to offer this as an option, you will be paying a transaction fee. It's negotiated on a percentage by each business. So if you see really small businesses, they're probably on a platform like Shopify, for example, and Shopify has kind of negotiated the rate in mass for them. That ranges between 2 and 5%, so it's pretty competitive relative to what they would be paying to credit card processor fees. Why do they choose to do this? Some of them are choosing to do this because obviously doing this kind of financing for purchases is way too complicated for most businesses. The only kind of businesses that would do these kind of like short-term financing would be really large purchases. So you might see them for like household appliances. You might see them for furniture, like large purchases that consumers do. Some small businesses might do financing like on their own. But generally, that's too much to do. Like I see tons of like small stationery shops that are a 1 or a 2 person business that are selling stickers on the internet, and they are able to do these Afterpay, Klarna, whatever it might be, Affirm, because they would never be able to offer financing. That's way too complex for a small business that small. But because they can do this, why are they doing it? Because it might cost them more money, but they might make a sale they wouldn't make otherwise. How many people would have gone out and bought Pelotons if they hadn't had access to 0% financing? And I think what's important is like, as someone who has pretty large cash reserves, thinks about all of my purchases quite a lot, I gotta say, I've been tempted by these because you see that when you check out and you're like, $100 or 4 payments of $25. That sounds very doable. And what it's doing is it's making it more attractive to you as a consumer to buy products. So what's notable about these is that they don't do a hard inquiry on your credit account. They do a soft inquiry on your credit account. So if you are someone that doesn't have you have a thin credit portfolio, and you don't necessarily have access to a credit card, you might be able to finance purchases you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. But the other thing is that they run a real risk, right? Because they aren't doing hard inquiries on your credit. There's a real risk of what's called loan stacking. And loan stacking means that people are borrowing lots of loans, right? So you're borrowing short-term loans, personal loans from a bunch of different places, because you can see these when you check out everywhere. So there's a real risk to you as a consumer of like, yes, it might be a 0% interest loan and it's a small amount, but if you're loan stacking, if you're doing this from a ton of different retailers, there's a possibility you're not going to be able to meet those obligations. Most of the buy now, pay later firms are 0% financing. And then if you miss one of those auto pays, then they might charge you a late fee. One of the largest ones here in the US, which is called a firm, actually does not do late fees. So they don't make any money off those late fees. What are the downsides of these buy now, pay later? Well, you run the risk of loan stacking. And then the other thing is that you do not have access to the same kinds of dispute protections that you might get if you used a credit card to make that same purchase. So for credit cards, if you return, it's pretty straightforward. If you return the item you purchased, it's pretty straightforward how you deal with that. A lot of people have had a lot of trouble with returning the item and still being on the hook for the full amount of the purchase to the Afterpay lender. So the buy now, pay later and lender, I should say. Afterpay is a brand name of these. But buy now, pay later is a lot to say, right? BNPL is the industry term for it, but that's also, I find, hard to say. But you are on the hook for that. Additionally, like if there's fraud or misrepresentation of the purchase, there are regulations around credit cards in the United States, especially about the kind of market that this about what credit card companies have to do, and you have to not be on the hook for that. However, those same things do not apply. What are you actually getting when you apply for a buy now, pay later, when you decide that you want to split that purchase up? What you are getting is you're getting a short-term loan. But I think what's really important to understand is how these loans are actually picked up. So all of these buy now, pay later companies, what they do is they have an algorithm that will underwrite the loan. So they're making a credit decision about whether or not they'll lend to you in the second while you are kind of there, like while you are trying to like figure out, you're clicking purchase. What they're doing is evaluating you. They may reject you for that loan. That is their own proprietary algorithm. And I think one of the really important things to understand when it comes to credit card lending and credit scores in the United States is while the credit system is not perfect, the credit system literally was founded by both the civil rights and the feminism movement, the women's rights movements, under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act in the 1970s, because prior to the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, there was a bunch of factors that could be used to determine if you were able to be lent to that now they can't decide based on. So the whole goal of the credit system was to create a score that, yes, is done by proprietary algorithms by the credit bureaus, but it has to exclude things like race, religion, sex, marital status, various other protected factors. Previously, it was done by individual lenders, and it might be based on whether or not you cheated on your wife, or if you paid your tab at the bar down the street. Any information they could acquire on you. And access to credit has been a really important and pivotal part of the civil rights movement. That's one of the reasons that Black-owned lending institutions was such a large part of Reconstruction and the post-Civil War era, because we were seeing that not being able to get access to capital to build generational wealth, to build businesses, was not accessible to formerly enslaved people. And so it is important to understand why we have the credit scoring system that we do have in the United States. Women were not able to access credit on their freaking own if they were married until the 1970s. And I think it's really important to understand why we have that. So they still can't make lending decisions based on protected classes, because that's part of the overall lending regulations in the United States. It varies in each country, and these exist in lots of countries, but they have to follow the regulations around that. But they are not... They're not required to make their algorithm clear. We don't have transparency into their underwriting algorithm. So once they've decided if they're going to underwrite you or not, they actually, the loan itself comes from a bank. So each one of these providers has a bank that they work with. And the bank will then issue you a loan for like maybe, let's say $500 again. So you'll get a loan for $500, but that loan does not go on your credit report. That loan is kind of to a firm. A firm will then pay the money to the merchant, which it's just the same as if you had paid with any other payment method. They get that $500. And the merchant will, there will be a slight commission that the buy now, pay later will take off the top of that. So let's say it's 5%. So you buy something for $500. A firm takes a loan from this bank, but it's not attached to your credit report. It's attached to a firm. And the lender, the company that is selling the product, they get $500 minus 5% off the top. So, they'll get $475 off the top of that money, and they just straight get those. Then they take that money, and a firm or whatever it is, whatever company it is, has a contractual obligation to buy the loan from that bank because they didn't have any part. That bank has no part in the underwriting. They didn't ever meet you as a borrower if you're trying to buy something. All of that decision was made by the Buy Now, Pay Later app. So then they need to purchase that loan. So at this point, a firm has actually lost money because they are paying an origination fee for that short-term loan to the bank. And if they are charging 0% interest, they are usually making what's called in the industry a loss on loan, which means that even if you pay all your amount, because it's a 0% loan, they've paid, and because even though they made that 5% commission, they paid more in origination fees and fees from the bank that has originated it. So they are taking a loss on loan. Why would they do this? Why would they offer 0% interest loans to consumers if they're taking a loss every time they do it? One, because they are desperate to get market share because it's fintech. And for a while, they were getting money pumped into them. And we can talk a little bit about what's going on with these companies, because from a market perspective, it is not good. Valuations are just tanked over the past year. So they were very much being propped up by the stock market bubble that was going on. So why would they do that? Well, because there is a thing in the world of lending called the vintage. And the vintage of loans represents the mix of the type of consumers that are in a loan portfolio. So companies that are lenders, they want to make sure that they have a good mix of the different type of loans. Usually the loans that make the most money and the most revenue are going to be what are called subprime loans. And that's if people are risky, businesses, countries, whatever it is, are unlikely to pay it back because we use credit score as a metric here in the US for individuals, but you don't know a lot about them. They are risky. They've been bad at paying back debt in the past. Then they are called a subprime borrower, and they will pay a highest interest rate. Those high interest rates are there because they're compensating for the risk of those borrowers not paying it back. However, even though there's lots of revenue in those borrowers, those subprime borrowers, you don't want to only have a portfolio made of subprime borrowers, as we've discovered during the last financial crisis with subprime mortgages. So what they want is a vintage that has a good mix of what are called prime borrowers and subprime borrowers. What are prime borrowers? Prime borrowers are people like me. People that have access to credit outside of these buy now, pay later schemes. We have credit cards. We have plenty of ways that we could finance this purchase without use of these buy now, pay later schemes. But 0% interest is appealing to us because, if we maybe used a credit card, then we would be paying a higher interest rate, even though we do have access to a credit card. And for a lot of us, we are attracted by possibly the float that we can get, meaning like, yes, we're getting 0% money, so we can just keep a little bit of our own money while it earns interest. So they need a good mix of both these prime and these subprime borrowers, because otherwise they have too much risk, right? If they're only lending to people that could not otherwise get access to credit, they have a very risky portfolio. So they want a good vintage. They want a good mix of the different types of borrowers. So that is why they are doing this 0% loans, is so that they can kind of keep the balance. We have seen, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of people that are using this. In Britain, Klarna is the biggest by market share of these buy now, pay later providers, and 1/3 of British consumers are said to be a customer of Klarna. So they have used buy now, pay later via Klarna for any kind of purchase. And what is concerning and a sign of the recession that is here or on its way is that more and more the share of these buy now, pay later transactions are for lower and lower dollar amounts. And instead of being luxury products, which was the, original, like, oh, you can afford this $500 printer that you might not otherwise, or these $500 shoes, or this Peloton product, more and more of them are for household goods like groceries and things like that. A lot of consumers are saying that's the only way that they could afford to be able to pay for these. In the US, we say that 4 out of 5 consumers, this is from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's most recent study, 4 out of 5 consumers in the US have used buy now, pay later at least once. It sounds like these things are really similar, but it is important to understand like the proliferation of these, why this is important to consider in the scale of the entire economy. Because one of the other ways that these companies make money is by packaging up the loans that they have and reselling them. They securitize these loans. And it is important to understand why securitizing a mix of subprime and prime loans into a package is concerning, because what happened in 2008? Subprime mortgages. We had a bunch of people being offered access to credit without a lot of verification. So we had what were called no asset, no income nanny loans. And nanny loans were people taking out mortgages without their assets or their income being checked. Interesting. How is this similar to buy now, pay later? Well, do you get your assets or your income checked when you buy now, pay later? Is it being checked against a credit score? No, it's being checked against a proprietary algorithm. And then what happens with those loans? Well, because they aren't making money off these zero interest loans, they are making money off the securitization, the packaging of these loans into securities that then can be resold. So it's really, really important to understand what is happening here. And one of the reasons that these 0% loans are being pushed so high is so that the securitization of these type of loans, like Affirm in particular, which has these US consumers, is that like they are trying to get these attractive prime consumers to up the ratings of those securities. And Eric is on it. Rating agencies, oh no, you retracted the message before it's on the screen. Rating agencies applied subprime A+ rating. So essentially, we saw in the past ratings agencies looking at the subprime loans and rating them highly, saying these are very safe debts. However, we know that of the consumers that are using these buy now, pay later consumers, about roughly in the US, about 56% of these consumers do not have access to credit otherwise. So there's arguments that are good one way or the other, right? There's arguments where you can say, what's really cool about buy now, pay later is they are providing access to low interest or no interest loans. They're a modern form of layaway that makes it possible for consumers that don't have access to credit to be able to finance these smaller purchases. Obviously, they are being used in a really important way. Especially in like the United Kingdom, we're seeing them a lot more used for household purchases because we're seeing this huge cost of living crisis go on in the UK right now. And we can say this is an important thing as long as people are able to pay them off. But there are flip sides, downsides to this. One, we're seeing shifts in the industry that are concerning right now, which I can dive into a little bit more maybe after the donut, where I want to talk about kind of the balance sheets of some of these companies. These consumers are not building credit when they are using these. Unless they miss a payment, their borrowing is not getting reported on their credit score. So what we're seeing is young consumers who are the primary target of these. Almost all of the subprime borrowers are Gen Z. They are younger consumers, which make up a huge bulk of the buy now, pay later consumers overall. It's actually Gen Z's favorite form of payment, interestingly enough. But it is important to think about, okay, well, what we are doing is a dismantling of the credit system, and we are making consumers reliant to get access to financing, which has been important all through history, right, for access to capital. The way that the United States uses credit is bananas, but, access to capital has been foundational. It existed even in the Bible. But it is important to wrap your head around why we should be concerned, because these consumers have this risk of loan stacking. They have this risk of possibly overdrafting, which could cause them to not be able to get bank accounts if they get on paychecks here in the US, which is or check systems here in the US, which essentially makes it harder for you to get a bank account. It's kind of like a credit score, but for banks and more secret. But they could be getting overdrafts because they have to be enrolled in these auto deposits. And if they have a late payment, I think it was, hold on, let me find late payment. Sorry, I have a lot of notes on this, but I have so many stats, I don't want to get them wrong. So in the UK, 56% of consumers who use buy now, pay later had been refused a credit card and made a late payment or missed one altogether. 1 in 3 borrowers in the UK. And I think it's close to, if they made a late payment, hold on. I put too many stats in my sheet, you all. So we saw credit scores drop. Yes, 72% of Americans saw their credit scores drop, according to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, after missing a payment on buy now, pay later payments. So in addition to trying to appeal to these consumers that don't have access to credit cards, we're also, and not building their credit scores with positive information, even if they are making these payments. If they do make a bad payment, they miss a payment or are late on them, then they're seeing their credit scores drop. And I think that's one of the reasons that is important to wrap your head around. I know I've said important to wrap your head around bazillion times. I'm not the most on script today. Okay, we have so many comments, so I'm going to read some of the comments before I eat the donut. Yes, Eric says, I know Peloton stock shot up. Yes, and I think Peloton stock shot up partially because of, one, how much people were overbidding on stocks generally. We saw a huge asset bubble with the stock market, which I talked about tons at the time, but also because of the access to easy credit. And yeah, it's tanked since then. Pretty much every stock is tanked though, so we're not you know, um, the Swedes started it with Klarna, and then everyone else said, hey, we should do that. Yeah, Klarna was one of the first, and it is one of the largest, but Affirm is quickly gathering a lot of market share here in the United States because the US consumers are like the most attractive because we love to borrow and we love to spend. And so, Affirm is already gathering a lot of that. Geograph Concept says, I don't understand how a firm makes money because there's never any interest when I do the staggered payments. Well, they make money from both the merchant exchange fees, they make money from packaging up that debt, and they make money on late fees on people that don't pay. Oh, wait, Affirm doesn't charge late fees. They're the only one. But the other thing, they don't make money. So, a lot of these companies have had massive devaluations. So and their valuations, there's only one that's publicly traded of any of these buy now, pay later firms. And a lot of them were planning on IPOs here in the US, which is the attractive market for, these kind of fintech companies to go out for the US stock market. A lot of these IPOs got canceled, but additionally, several of these firms saw they essentially did a down round. So they raise money from these, these investors, these venture capital firms generally, that were investing in fintech. And every time they raise money, there's a valuation that goes out, what percentage of their company they're going to give out to these investors based on the value that these investors are giving them. And quite a few of them had down rounds where they needed to raise more money in order to gobble up the market share and the networks that they were building. And quite a few of them had down rounds where they were valued at like 75% less than they had in their previous rounds. And so that's nerve-wracking, right? They do also sell your data, and that is also one of the really important things about the general kind of world about this is that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau just did this big study, but generally there's less regulations in this part of the industry. They're kind of existing as like a intermediary broker between these existing banks, which do have these regulations about personal loans, and these and the consumers, but they're not under the same kind of purview of a lot of the regulations that credit agencies are. And so, yes, there have been quite a few concerns around selling that data. My job has a contract with another company to let us do this out of our paychecks. It's very weird. Yeah, these like stacking networks is happening a lot in fintech right now. And I think that is really scary. E-bike folks really want more financing options for their customers. I'm not really surprised. I mean, so one of the things with e-bikes, right? They're approaching the cost of a used car. I mean, not right now because the used car market's really weird, but generally they're like a lot of the higher end e-bikes are approaching the cost of a used car. And I remember back like circa like 2010, just for getting a bike wasn't even e-bikes because very few people were getting e-bikes in 2010. The technology was not really there yet. But even just getting bikes, I working with a credit union on the origination of a bike loan product here in Portland, which was essentially a personal loan so that people could purchase bikes and kind of stretch it out, because before the only real option was a credit card. Now we have tons and tons of financing options available for people for these kind of larger purchases that are competitive or even better than what we're seeing in car financing at the moment. But that was, one of the major arguments of like, if we expect people to switch modes, we need to make this accessible for people with the same kind of financing options that we're seeing for cars. I don't like these services because my wife has impulse control problems and poor financial education. She keeps using these. Absolutely. I think this is one of the really big concerning parts about them is that they're very attractive to consumers. And, a lot of these firms generally, the buy now, pay later firms, like partner with different commerce to have kind of exclusive rights with, Peloton, Sephora, whatever it might be. But more and more, a lot of them now are making it possible to do this for any purchase. They'll give you a one-time like Visa credit card number that you can use to pay for a purchase, even with a vendor that doesn't allow you to do it. And that is one of these areas where we're really going to see people getting into a lot of danger. And, the average individual order value in the United States in 2021 for these buy now, pay later was $135. That's not a ton of money. I mean, 135, it's something. It's nothing to shake a stick at, but it is not probably luxury products generally, unless they're things like, skincare or something where $135 would be on the higher end. So one of the concerns that we have is that we're seeing people that need to finance these lower purchases that are at the most risk of not having that wiggle room in their paychecks. And they're built to work for people with these addictive tendencies. Newbold One says, luckily I'm managing to ignore these things. I do not need that kind of trouble back in my life. I know, it's really scary. Yes, the 1/3 here, that was for the number of consumers. Eric says, A+ means profitable, not risky, which is probably false in most cases. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why if we're rating this debt as being very profitable debt, if we're putting it in the highest rating category, but in fact, it is very risky. This is, the fundamental issues that we were dealing with in the last financial crisis are because we had these huge swaths of loans where they were saying, everybody always pays their mortgages. This is great ratings. And who was investing in those? Pensions. Like, the people that were thinking, oh, these are really solid investments. We were seeing large amounts of money invested in what were very risky assets that otherwise they would not be able to do. And pensions and certain kinds of, defined, other defined benefit plans for retirement have requirements about they're not allowed to invest below a certain level of ratings when it comes to these kind of obligations, because they're not supposed to put it's bad management. It's too risky. And so there's real actual SEC regulations about what can be invested in by a lot of these different funds. And because they were essentially being propped up as being more valuable, we really saw that kind of risk. And, I think one of the really important things to consider around the vintage, so the mix of prime, people like me using these services, versus subprime, someone that doesn't have access to a credit card, doesn't have a good credit score, that when we look at these vintages, right, we might see that people that had good access to credit and had really overvalued portfolios were still using these for things like Peloton, other luxury products that maybe are going to be using them less and less, or they're people that are going to be turned into, subprime or less desirable consumers. And we might see the value of those loan portfolios be smaller and smaller. Aaron says, I have expensive taste in e-bikes. I just converted my bike to an e-bike with a new front wheel, and I'm glad I didn't have to spend $6,000 on e-bikes. Whew, yeah. A good quality e-bike with a lot of features is worth the price. Yeah, I don't know. I'm afraid of the e-bike thing because I think they're great overall, but I'm worried that if I get one, I'm going to want it all the time. And I really like my bike, so I've got it dialed in. But I have been tempted to get it for my 12-mile very early commute to the rink that I do, because it would just mean that I get to sleep in that much later. I also have long stretches with no stoplights on bike paths that I feel like an e-bike would be very good for, especially that early in the morning where I'm not sharing with many other road users. So anyway, we're getting off track here with the e-bike. Yes. What other things can I say about this? I'm trying to see if there's any really important things here. So Almost all of these companies are losing money. um, we're likely to see the tightening of credit. So we're likely to see more and more of these companies start rejecting people that they may have allowed to utilize before. Regulation is very slow to come. And I think that is really important to kind of think about when it's really important to think about when we're talking about this, is how this has echoes as a bubble, as a new kind of financial mechanism. It has echoes of a lot of the things we saw in the last financial crisis. Innovation is important, and innovation in the space of access to financial services, access to financing, I think is really important. There are upsides to allowing people access to financing through these, because they tend to be a lot less predatory than the types of credit that these consumers would have access to otherwise. So, one of the kind of two main alternate options that a lot of consumers that don't have access to credit cards would use for financing purchases would be something like a payday loan, which we saw a huge spike in those during the last financial recession, the last financial crisis. Why do I keep saying financial recession? All recessions are financial. During the fiscal crisis in 2008. And then the other type would be pawn shop loans. And so pawn shop loans are essentially a high interest rate loan that is secured against an item. And so these theoretically are better, but there's all the downsides that we spoke to. And, the thing about payday loans is they get a lot of flack, and they get a lot of flack from people that do have access to credit, of like, you should never take out a payday loan. But the people that are giving people crap for taking out payday loans are failing to recognize that often it is the only form of financing available to folks. And they exist as a useful tool in the way, in the total universe of financing options. If the alternative is going to a unregulated loan shark, that will literally beat you up if you do not pay back. There are a lot of reasons why payday loans can be a valuable tool if properly regulated. But I think what we're seeing now, a lot of the changes and restrictions of payday loans that happened, especially at the state level, after the last financial crisis, and we saw with pawn shop loans that happened after the crisis in the 1970s and the Great Depression, that happened with general credit lending after the Great Depression. We see these new forms of financing pop up to appeal to subprime buyers. And each time there is a reaction when consumers get screwed over, where we then see more regulation in the space. Payday loans are useful in a pinch, and in California, they're highly regulated. Yeah, Eric Likeness says, in the hierarchy of loan shark, pawn shop, and payday loan, it's marginally better if it's regulated. Enforcement is something else altogether. Agreed. Yeah, and, we also see, I think that these kind of categories all get a lot of flack, but a lot of people don't realize that these subprime methods exist in every kind of lending. Obviously, subprime mortgages got real tightened up after the last financial crisis. But we have what's called buy here, pay here, which is subprime auto loans. So buy here, pay here lots have some of the highest repossession rates. I think repossession is close to 80% in the case of those auto loans. And those are people that is often the only kind of financing they can access for auto loans. And so subprime exists in essentially every category. Yes, Eric said this actually much better than my wandering was saying, which is enforcement will come sooner or later when a financial crash occurs. But that's one of the reasons why I think it's important to keep an eye on these, both what can screw over consumers when it comes to these, because these theoretically are fine if you're able to use them responsibly, but the risks are really high because they exist in sort of this gray in-between area of regulation. But regulation will come, but the goal is to not get both the economy, the entire global economy, as happened with subprime mortgage securitization during the 2008 financial crisis and the crash. Either the entire economy or the economy of a country. When we're seeing 4 out of 5 Americans have utilized buy now, pay later methods, and 1/3 of consumers in Great Britain have utilized Klarna, like, then we're starting to see the proliferation of these things. Yes. Also, we've already seen a huge tanking in the value of these companies. So I mentioned a lot of them had what's called down rounds, where a lot of them lost like huge amounts of that. Klarna got their valuation lost by 80% in the most recent down round. It went from being valued at like 45 billion to being valued at like 4 billion, which is pretty big drop. I'm not precise on those numbers. But I know it was 80%. Altogether, collectively, we have seen the 10 largest fintechs, which is this category of tech mixed with financial services that these all fall into. The 10 largest fintechs have lost 850 billion in value in the past year. And so, like, there is a lot going on generally when it happens to these. Let's eat a donut, and then I'm happy to answer some questions or talk more about the use of these. I also have some graphs. We should show some graphs. But this is Talking Dough and Eating Donuts, so we do eat a donut. So let's go. All right. So here's the donut. Oh wait. Yeah, here's the donut. What do you think? Sorry for the bad background, but I got a lot of stuff on my desk. It is a vegan maple bacon. So the bacon is made of like coconut and like smoke, but it's an old-fashioned donut. So it's like a nice hard donut. So I'm looking forward to it. Wow. This is so mapley. It's really hard inside. It's like a bread. It's like the crunch is kind of perfect. Geograph Concept says, you've eaten this one before. I remember it because I'm allergic to coconut. I didn't eat this old-fashioned version of it. It had maple bacon on the top, but it wasn't an old-fashioned donut. Low waste, high melanin says, is it very sweet? It's medium sweet, I would say. The maple is very in the background. And I would say the donut inside the bread is not sweet. So as long as you get like a chunk of all 3 items in each bite, it's a pretty good mix. We have a question, which is good, which Eric pretty much answered, but the question was, what is subprime? Does it just mean less than optimal or something else? So subprime is an industry term that is used to refer to like the type of borrowers. So prime borrowers are the median borrowers, essentially, their risk level is lower, their ability to pay, their likelihood of defaulting is lower. And what's similar in the world of prime used in terms is prime rate is also the rate that the best borrowers get. So prime rate is essentially used as like, this is what a borrower that has, in the case of individual borrowers, a good credit score would be paying to borrow. Usually when you go out and do borrow, you're going to be borrowing prime plus a little bit, unless you're really we like to say that prime borrowers are the really great prime rate is only paid by the people that don't need to borrow money. Right? So it's usually paid by like corporations, like commercial paper and stuff like that. But so prime can refer to the rate, but prime borrowers are the borrowers that you really want to lend to, but they don't command high interest rates. So they're not good for revenue because you're not charging them very much interest because you are pretty certain they'll pay back. So, they'll get you some recurring amounts, but you're not making very much off the interest. Subprime are really risky. So they are paying much higher interest rates, but the worry is that they'll default on the loans. And, this comes up when we talk about subprime, prime, all of this sort of both debt and assets, all of it. This is really important when you're also talking about countries. So when it comes to the United States, we have always had the best of the credit ratings around the world because we as a country love to borrow money. Like I said, we literally borrowed money in order to bring the freaking Mayflower over and paid it off in payments, right? Although most of those folks died. But we love to borrow money, but we pay it back. And why is this important when it comes to interest rates of prime versus subprime? Because we pay it back, people love to lend us money because they're like, oh, yeah. But they don't get very high interest rate for it, which is why when you get U.S. Treasury securities, they are considered essentially risk-free. So the 90-day Treasury bond is used in the financial industry as the risk-free rate, whatever the yield is on it, because essentially it's considered to be a no risk. However, when Congress in the United States keeps playing chicken with what's called our debt ceiling, which is this arbitrary line of how much we can borrow, when they keep playing chicken, it downgrades our credit rating because it makes it sound like we might not pay back our debt. Low waist, high melanin says, I know I'm subprime. I'm okay with that. It won't follow me to Austria. They don't do credit ratings. They do have, they don't do U.S. credit ratings, but they do have some kind of system, right? That bit I get. It was just the prime, which I was wondering about. It's not a word we'd use in that context. Yeah, vintage is also a hilarious word to describe a mix of credit. It's like a wine term they use to describe a loan portfolio, but there's nothing that, financial industries love more than making up their own words that make things sound more complicated than they need to be. This is pretty good. I still don't know the rating, though. All right. 4 out of 5. That's my rating. I was thinking about it. I like it. I like the coconut bacon the most. I know that Latitude is not happy about that. But you helped me shift my understanding because now I get that all the labels are about how much profit they can make from someone. Kind of. You would say that subprime sounds negative, but it's also about risk. So it's not just about profit, but yeah, it's finance. So it's pretty much always about profit. But, it's weighing the general risk around all of it. But yeah, I would say a solid score. All right. I need to wrap up pretty soon, but I'm really curious. Have you ever used a buy now, pay later? I've been tempted. I kind of want to do it just to like try it out, to see what the process is like. But I'm so focused on like, I plan ahead for all of my purchases. As last week I talked about my skates that I've needed to get for 4 years to replace my 20-year-old skates. And I'm finally doing it. And like, yeah, it would be attractive to like borrow the money for that really expensive purchase. Like if I'm going to spend between $1,000 and $1,500 on skates, like it would be nice to split it up into payments. But also I have been saving each month into an account for that. And it's a luxury purchase for me. Like I obviously do not need ice skates to live. I certainly don't need new custom ice skates to live. It's a purchase I value. I'm glad I'm making it, but like it is, it's a luxury purchase. And so, I would be a really attractive borrower in the case of a buy now, pay later. I've got a good credit rating. I'm very likely to repay it. I'm like, it'll make my like monthly, outgoings more steady rather than have a huge spike or whatever. But it is, the question is, why would I do that when I could just pay up front from my own stress level? I also will say, as someone who has an absurd amount of access to credit, like unreasonable, I could borrow as much or more than I make on an average year because everybody wants to lend me money because I pay it back every month on time. I have a really high credit score. And I like credit card churning as a hobby, so I get a lot of credit cards. But I will also say that Oh My Dollar as a business, I run Oh My Dollar debt-free. But that's like a category at which financing would be helpful. Like when buying inventory, I'm buying thousands of dollars of inventory. And unless I want to make a personal loan to the business, I don't usually leave that much money in the business because I take it out as my own, salary. And you build a credit score for your business. If you've got a EIN and an LLC and you're just start applying for credit cards, for your business, you will start to build a credit score. And so I have a credit score for my business, and it is very good. The only way that I borrow money is that I have a credit card and I pay it off every single month. But especially PayPal, because they see how much money like I have come in from people that buy via PayPal, and then they send it on to me. So they know like how much I'm putting through from a PayPal standpoint. They desperately want me to borrow money at like 0 or 1% interest. And so that is a category in which like being able to take like huge purchases that will then make me more money, right? It's one thing to do it for a luxury purchase on the consumer side that I don't really need, that I can just save and I can wait on. But it's a totally different thing on the business side, where I know that this investment of $5,000 in inventory will make me $25,000 over the course of time. And so being able to kind of spread it out means that I have the ability to kind of push it a little bit more, like, make it earlier or whatever that I might do, rather than wait to get kind of the revenue from there. And, that's where financing originally started before we made it accessible to consumers. Okay. I don't like to test fate that way. It's offered every time I use PayPal. I ignore it. Yeah, that I kind of failed to mention, but PayPal absolutely got in on the buy now, pay later game. I did use it once for a $60 order on Shopify. I think it's called Afterpay. Yeah, Afterpay is the one that most Shopify vendors use. And what was your experience of using it? Geograph Concept says, yes, when I wanted to make a big purchase and I'm like, well, this will cover me for impulse purchases all month, so I better spend it via my impulse budget all month. Yeah, that's very interesting. So the fact that so many of you have used this is making me less shocked about the stats on this. I gotta say, they've done their research around like how to make it attractive to consumers, because I'm always like, in my head. Every time I check out on Amazon, it's like, you could just pay this over time, because I have an Amazon business card. I started seeing it during COVID. I was curious, but never clicked. K-Walk Comedy says, I recently used Affirm. Did you have a good experience? I would like to know. I asked people if they used it, but nobody has told me if they liked it. I'm also one of those people that opted out of credit card offers. I don't want to see them. I don't need whatever it is. This is very good, especially if you have a wife with impulse control issues. It's a good, smart decision to make, I think. Fuzzbubble says, sort of, when I bought a mattress 2 years ago, they offered no interest for 4 years of payments. And so I do that. Yeah, that's, mattresses were one of those things that was very commonly done in these like chunks of change. They've long been one of the vendors that has done this without kind of these third party. It's the proliferation of these available for much smaller purchases that is kind of concerning. K-Hello, is it K-Hello or K-Jello? I've asked you this before, and I'm sorry, I forgot. I used Affirm for some furniture. It was more about the float, as you say, not having the cash. Yeah, I think that the float, especially for these so-called prime consumers, is one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, but I could have access to that money and I could spend it in other ways if I spread that over more time. K-Walk Company says, for some DJ equipment, another example of like, if you're using that to make money, then you could make sense of like, that's access to financing that a lot of people don't get access to otherwise, right? Like if you're a new business, nobody's signing up to lend you money in the very beginning of your business, but you usually need to invest in equipment. And this is a perfect example of access to being able to get the kind of equipment. Like, let's say you want to start a cleaning business or DJing, whatever it might be, and you don't have access to any business line of credit for those businesses, but you need to make initial purchases. And you don't have family that you're comfortable like borrowing money from. You don't have those kind of people in your life that've got the money to shell out. This is a great example of how you might be able to use this kind of leverage to make it work better over time. Like you need to get a nice vacuum. You need to get cleaning supplies. All of the kind of things that you need as startup supplies. Say you want to start a lawn mowing business. Any of those kind of things. This is a good way to get access to financing if you're someone that doesn't traditionally have access to it. Pamela says, what about a spur of a moment sale on a certain coveted watch? What is the coveted watch? I want to know. I have this like cheap, I got it for free. It's a cheap Chinese smartwatch. And I do not like it aesthetically. It's middlingly okay as a watch. I will say battery life is like 10 days, which is like kind of close to what my old Pebble RIP used to be. And I've been interested in the watch world lately because I'm starting to think maybe I should just get a regular freaking watch because I use fewer and fewer of the smartphone features. I just did a purchase with PayPal credit right before the stream. Y'all are doing a great job of showing me exactly why these are so popular. Low Waist High Melanin says, I like to buy secondhand a lot as well, so it's not always useful to me. I did find something very shocking. So one, I buy secondhand for almost all my clothes, but I buy them off Mercari and Poshmark mostly, sometimes ThreadUp, which is like an online thrift store. And all of those, or I buy them from, what are they called? Like Facebook groups where you almost always pay with PayPal because PayPal has like protections built in for both sides. And all of those have access to financing now. And it's very interesting to kind of think about that. There is a Movado watch I've lusted on for years. Interesting. And PayPal is offering me pay for. Are you going to go for it? Do you actually is this a watch that you really want or need? My thought is if I wouldn't buy it in cash, I don't want to buy it on these buy now, pay laters. That's my philosophy. If I wouldn't buy it in cash, I don't want to buy it with these. I understand the value of them, as I've mentioned, like, and their ability to smooth consumption for people. But if I wouldn't take the same amount of cash out of my account and buy it, I wouldn't do it. The PayPal one has just appeared here 3-4 months ago. Again, I ignore it. Seems like it has cultivated itself a more approachable image than serious credit. Yes, absolutely. That's their big argument. They also, like, all of their marketing is around the idea that they're less predatory than the other options. And they really, like, focus on that. But, like, remember, they're making money somehow, right? Technically they're losing money, but eventually they're hoping to make money. So I do think it's, like, important to consider the incentives, right, around all of the. Amazon has one as well, but my sister has a credit card with them, so I just pay her instead. Yeah, use your sister as the buy now, pay later. It comes out of my card automatically, but I usually write down the date it does so I don't forget. Yeah, this is why you need a good planner that you can buy with buy now, pay later, so you can write down all of your transaction types. One of the problems with this is that they make young consumers think it's not real and they don't learn until something bad happens. I know. And the amount of consumers, it's around half of consumers are, depending on the country, of consumers using these buy now, pay laters are consumers that otherwise would not have access to a credit card. So we're especially seeing young consumers that don't realize they don't get the same protections as they will with a credit card. And they're at the same risk as any other kind of overextension of credit, which is very common with young borrowers. And so, we're seeing one of the areas that I'm really concerned, where we're seeing a lot of the data come out, is of young service members. So young service members are, like, generally considered in special categories of risk, partially because service members have some different provisions that kind of apply to them and their ability to get out of access to loans. But they tend to have very low information when it comes to lending because they tend to be young. They also, in the United States at least, tend to be more from low income. They're more likely to be from immigrant families, a lot of the newer service members. And the, like, concerns that we have around young service members and these buy now, pay later, a lot of them were spelled out in that Consumer Financial Protection Bureau report about this that just came out. The Journaling Broom says, it was a good experience using Afterpay. They charged me once every 2 weeks for 2 months. I can see it possibly being a long-term issue if you do these a son of these. Yeah, that's one of the things that, since it doesn't appear in your credit report, we've got this huge risk of loan stacking where people are doing a bunch from different vendors all at once. I have the Pusheen watch and it looks really professional until you get close. I love that. I didn't know Pusheen had a watch. Oh My Dollar show research in real time. ThreadUp's office is on the bus route to my dentist. Interesting. It's definitely good for things that are limited in quantity, sell out quickly, and then you don't have that kind of money on hand. Yeah, I'm one of those people that's very bad at buying things that are limited in quantity. I just get bitter when things are limited in quantity and sell out quickly, and then I just won't buy it. And I usually just think, well, I've saved myself some money. This is a me personality issue. This is not necessarily the advice I have. This sometimes costs me more money too, because I'll wait and I won't get things when I know, like, it's a good sale or whatever, and then I'll wait and I'll get it later. So I didn't know Mercari had that option. I use it and ignore it. I just use my debit card through Apple Pay or my PayPal debit card if I don't have the cushion to buy it. I have a question from Mercari, you all. I have this, speaking of things that are sold out or limited quantity, for years I wanted to get, I have this, like, see if I can pull up a photo of it. I have a jacket that is I got it used a bunch of years ago, and it is a pastel motorcycle jacket. And it's from this brand called Unif, which is kind of like a luxury or like a mid-up market brand, but I got it used. I have repaired it within an inch of its life because it's like a vegan leather one. But I love how it looks like in photos, but it can't be fixed anymore because it's vegan leather. So it just like flakes, and I've like repaired it as much as I can. But I have wanted for a couple years to replace it with this brand that was out of Poland called Sugar Pills that makes a neoprene version of it. And neoprene is very like, it's also called scuba fabric by some people. It's very practical for like a jacket fabric generally, and definitely a lot better than the plastic that vegan leather is made out of, but it still retains the same kind of quality. And I put off getting it for so long. This Polish company that was making it closed down, and I found it used on Macari, and I'm trying to decide if I should like get it. Hold on, there we go. Let's see if I can share this. So this is the jacket, and this is the vinyl version of it, and I really liked it. And I found it on Macari for like, it keeps dropping in price because Macari is like a used website, and it drops in price like every so often. And I found two versions of it. One of them is going for $250, and there's like no interest on it as far as I can tell. I think this person is asking for way too much money. I think it was like $80 with the exchange rate from Poland a couple years ago. And now I'm thinking I should maybe get it on Macari. But here's the other thing. Do I need more jackets, really? Because realistically, I don't. I do not need more jackets. But I am going to Japan, and I wore this other one when I was in Japan like 4 years ago. So I feel like maybe it might be time to get a different one. New World One says it's so on brand though. Get it before someone else does. Here's the thing, but if I don't get it, then I don't get it. It's fine. I'll just be without that jacket. Also check JP Macari because the second-hand prices are less crazy on there. Can you order from JP Macari, from Japan Macari? Because it's like mainly a Japanese, Macari is mainly a Japanese brand. But can you order from it if you're not in Japan? I'm very, very curious. I can't help there. I'm the gay with more coats than other people. I have a lot of coats. I do have a lot of coats, which is, and I'm moving, remember? So I'm like, should I really get another coat? You use Baiyi. Okay, this is good to know. I doubt that this is going to be on the Japanese Macari, though, I will say, because it's a Polish brand, and it was mostly sold like to U.S. consumers, because for a while it was being covered with that. Sugar Pills is a decent brand. Unif is a nice brand, but I will say this stupid jacket. I actually have it over here. That's why I keep gesturing over here. I have fixed it so many times, but like I added to it like this spandex fabric, and it's completely falling apart. Yeah, the whole front is not even like the original fabric because I put this like holographic on it. But it's just flaking, and you can see like and so it's really just not fixable at this point because it's the stupid vegan leather. But yeah. You all are going to talk me into it, aren't you? Most secondhand Vivienne West food is in Japan these days. Don't tell me that, because now I'm gonna want to go buy some when I'm in Japan. I know Amazon versus Amazon JP is difficult unless you have a banking account ship in Japan. My wife has the luxury of meeting all the requirements, including a Japanese shipping address. I have no problem ordering from Amazon Japan. I get from Amazon Japan all the time. It's like the most dangerous website, I would say. Because all the stationery products and everything. It's okay. Because I'm going to Japan in March, I have like a very long list of things that I'm going to buy, and part of it is coming from things that are listed on Amazon Japan. So I've budgeted like almost $900 for shopping when I'm in Japan, which is almost as much as I budgeted for the rest of the trip. Geograph Concept says, I'm logging onto Amazon Japan right now. It's really, the good news is the shipping is really expensive. The shipping is like 2 days. I mean, it's really fast though, even though it's coming from Japan. It's very dangerous and I would stay away. The point system is nice. I don't buy enough stuff on Amazon.co.jp that I get that many points. I shop on it a lot, but I don't actually buy stuff from it very often. Lois Ty Melanin says, just do it. You've been so patient, you'll regret it. Here's the thing. I don't usually regret not buying things. And I also did finally buy the dresses from Sweden that were very expensive last month that I've been talking about buying for ages. So yeah, if you want to see this is my expenses for last month. This is all just like group therapy for Lily's purchases that she wants to, also this is what's popped up when I searched for oh no. This is the image that popped up when I was looking for that jacket, is me at the cat sanctuary in Japan. Anyway. What was I looking up, y'all? Oh, I wanted to show you my budget for last month. Where did it go? Oh, did I never send it to my phone? I may never sent it to my phone. So we can't share it, so it's all over. Well, that's fine. Maybe next week I'll do my wrap up, but I spent like over $400 on clothes last month because I bought stuff that I had been putting off from Sweden for like 3 years. And it was the last one in my size, from the brand from 2 seasons, like 2 full years ago. So 4 seasons ago. And so finally I decided to do it. It's all cats all the way down. It was very fun. Like earlier, we were the live survey. Now we are the enablers. You all are terrible. Maybe I will order that jacket from Bakari. All right. I actually have to go to a group hang because I'm going to like see other humans, do things, see my friends, concept that we all don't really remember. So thank you all for joining me. I am still eager for your experiences with these buy now, pay laters. It sounds like people have been mostly having positive experiences and just kind of using it to smooth consumption, or because they don't have access necessarily to credit otherwise. So I've been very curious about it. And thank you all for enjoying this, like, is this the next recession exploration. I didn't show you any of the graphs, but it's okay. You all don't need to see graphs. And if you have any suggestions for topics, feel free to leave them in the comments on this video because I need more ideas for topics in the coming months. Things you want covered, questions you have, you can always send to questions@ohmydollar.com. And you can join the text crew at textcrew.ohmydollar.com if you want to be notified. And if you want to come hang out, come to forum.ohmydollar.com. We have challenges, savings challenges, cat photos, plants, discussions of parenting, whatever it might be. We also have a thread called Objects of Desire, where you can show off the things that you want to buy, but have decided not to buy. Or if, you want to find a way to buy something without using like Amazon or something like that, we'll help you research how to find it elsewhere. Anyway, stay safe. Stay well, and stay hydrated. Pet a cat if you have one available, and I will see you all next week. Bye.